7:45. You hear this song, the conversation with cannabis comes up, but you know what? All jokes aside, we took a field trip. Given the conversation with 420, coming up tomorrow, the protest that continues, what is it like if you've never been inside a pot dispensary? We wanted to discover that and some of the key issues surrounding safety, stigmas, and what legalization really is going to mean for this industry. Have a look.
So Dana, imagine I'm someone who's never been in a dispensary before. What am I going to experience my first time coming in?
At the front desk, we check whether or not you're a member. Although for our first 8 years, we were strictly medicinal, so you would have to have doctor's recommendation and paperwork to become a member of our dispensary. About 2 years ago, we decided to open our doors to all adults. So you'll either need your medical documentation or you'll just need some ID as an adult. You can wait a few minutes till it's your turn. When you come to the big board, there'll be a list of all the different cannabis strains that we have available. You can also see the different extracts and products like that you can use.
Where does the product come from so you know its quality when you're walking into a dispensary like this?
Well, we sure pride ourselves on trying to have a lot of different varieties of cannabis. People get different medicinal and social effects from different strains. Some people like to use the same variety every time because that's what works for them. Other people like to try different flavors and have variety so they don't get too tolerant to one particular strain. But we have people coming in trying to sell us cannabis that they've grown on a very regular basis. Most of it we reject. We have a very stringent process to check the quality of any products that come through here and making sure we're only providing medical grade products. So most of it doesn't get on the menu. But
how do you do that? What's the criteria to sift through it?
Well, we start with putting it under a microscope. When you're dealing with raw buds, putting it under a microscope, you can look very carefully. You can see the quality of the trichome heads where the resin is, the resin glands. You can see if it was harvested at the right time. You can see if there's any contaminants, any mold or other things that shouldn't be in there at all. Anything like that in there, it's immediately rejected.
How do you decide on the flavors, the strains, the names, the branding? How does that all work? Is that dispensary specific?
No, well, the names of strains, there's kind of different ways of naming strains. There's some names that are derived from where the strain comes from. So like Kush, it's supposed to be a strain from the Hindu Kush Mountains in India, or some other strains like Diesel or Blueberry will have a lineage and sort of growers that have produced that strain, stabilized it through breeding process. But some of the names are also fanciful and are more just to determine this guy grew some cannabis. They may not know the full lineage of what they grew, but it's a high quality product and it smells like this or it tastes like that, so we give it a name so we know what it is, but that name might not have any sort of meaning as to defining the genetics of the plant or things like that.
How is the legalization of recreational marijuana going to change the way that you operate?
If I could snap my fingers and tomorrow we become a legal cannabis outlet, that means that we have to cut off all of our current suppliers. The only product we can carry is raw buds from licensed producers. So all of our other products, our creams, our salves, our suppositories, any edibles, anything like that, we can't carry those because those aren't going to be legalized this year. They might get legalized next year, but with an election next year, I think that's probably still going to be a few years away, and we're only going to have legalization of raw buds in the immediate future.
What stigmas are still hanging over Vancouver?
Oh, there's definitely still stigma attached to being a cannabis user, probably less in Vancouver than some other parts of the country, but there's no question. This perception that legalization or these arguments that it's going to create chaos and everyone's going to start smoking weed all the time and everyone's going to be stoned all the time and it's going to be a big problem, and that's just not going to happen. But I think that there's still a lot of that going around, and I think that when the law does change and these things don't manifest, I think it'll be easier for people to accept cannabis, and then it'll be easier for the law to change more.
Let's take a moment, Riaz, after seeing that, to talk about the stigmas. I mean, while we were in there, we saw in their cases all those salves and things like that that you can put on topically for medicinal purposes, and they don't get you high. So there's this stigma that when you are using medicinal marijuana, recreational marijuana, that you're a stoner, and that's not actually the truth. There are old ladies who have never been high in their life that are using it for skin ailments, you know, and that's the future of Canada as recreational marijuana, medicinal marijuana becomes legal this summer.
Yeah, and the purposes for arthritis was really fascinating to hear. And then the other question, I thought, well, for legalizing it, do we still need the 420 protest that takes place year after year? But the point that was made by Dana right there of a lot of the products disappearing because of the specificity of the actual regulation, that opens up an exploration of the Cannabis Act and another reason to protest. So I don't think 420 is going to disappear anytime soon, but it creates a really interesting conversation here in the country.